Word nerd, wordsmith, wordy, wordless. Oxford Dictionary says a word is a single, distinct, meaningful element of speech or writing, used with others or sometimes alone. We say each one matters. No extra words is literature, minimalist style. And we're getting you right to the story. Saving Andy by Lars H. Hoffman. And, for the love of humanity, please come save me, concluded the video. Andy's voice very nearly broke towards the end of the sentence, making the plea sound as heartfelt as possible. There was a moment of silence before anybody spoke. Jason looked around the boardroom at the 13 seated men. The moment was pivotal. Jason was convinced that each and every one of the board members were making up their mind right in front of his eyes. Had it worked? "Thank you very much for this... The chairman paused, searching for words. Fascinating and moving presentation. We will, of course, need some time before we give you any sort of reply." "Of course," answered Jason. "We understand that a $30 billion investment over 10 years is not something to be taken lightly." "One final question. How certain are you that Andy is actually alive?" asked the chairman. This was good. He was using Andy's name, anthropomorphizing the space rover. 100%, said Jason without a moment's hesitation. The signal time to Titan is about an hour and a half from Earth, so she had to be autonomous. Her basic programming focused on learning from experience, much like a child, and at some point while driving around on Saturn's moon, she learned enough to become self-aware. He smiled his most charming salesman smile and started collecting the materials he had used for the presentation. He stood up, thanked the board for their time, and walked out. Outside the building, Carmen was waiting for him with an unlit cigarette in her left hand. When she saw him come out of the door, she hurried over to him. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think they are going for it. They might actually fund the rescue mission, and we can get her back home," he said smilingly. "Her?" said Carmen disapprovingly. "It might have developed sentience and actual intelligence, but Andy is not a man or woman." "Yes, sure, I know," said Jason. "But the only reason why this meeting is different from the 14 previous ones we've had with space operating companies is that I referred to Andy as a female, and her voice was changed in the video." "Do you really think that is enough?" "I don't think the men in that boardroom will be able to ignore a damsel in distress." Sunshine and Asteroids by Jason J. Nugent. A warm, salty breeze blew in along palm trees sprouting from the water like cattails. They formed two neat rows as though framing a wide boulevard, which they once had. The sun rose in the center of the water road as city planners envisioned many years ago. Though then, concrete lay between the palms, not the gently lapping water now occupying the space. The sun's waking rays cast an alluring array of colors across the water. Tim stood and admired the morning beauty. He woke on a small island where a gas station once stood. He remembered the out-of-state license plates that came there, paying for overpriced gas and soda on their way to the giant amusement parks further south. He lived in Florida his entire life and resented those people with their smugness and disregard for natural beauty of the land. Now they'd never visit again, and he was okay with that. At least he knew it once. He'd still be there when the receding waters revealed a new land, a new paradise, and he couldn't wait. If he lasted long enough. Tim ran out of food long ago, forced to eat any bug or small water creature brave enough to land on his patch of land. He guessed he lost more weight than he used to think he needed to lose, and the unrelenting sun baked his skin to a dark brown. He kind of liked that. He always found it hard to get tanned before. Now, once the waters went away, he'd be skinny and tanned, ready to be the man of some girl's dreams. No one knew the asteroid was there until it was too late. Instead of crashing in the midst of a large metropolis, its trajectory took it to the center of the Atlantic. That was worse. Going out from all directions, a huge wave circled out and grew in size and intensity until it raced towards the shorelines of Africa, Portugal, and the east coast of Canada and the United States. The government tried to get the population moving west, but the majority of people thought they'd weather the storm like any other hurricane. That proved to be a mistake. The waters rose several months ago, destroying everything in its path. At first, there was a mass confusion. People didn't heed the tidal wave warning, assuming they were too far inland to be affected. They were wrong. The enormous wave washed across the state, coming in from the Atlantic and crashing to the Gulf of Mexico. Tim discounted the radio and television warnings. His phone screamed at him as the state and then National Weather Services issued alerts. Tim marveled at the rising sun and breathed in deep. Salty air filled his lungs. He exhaled loudly. "Yeah, that's the ticket," he said to no one. He stretched his arms high overhead, his tense muscles straining. His arms popped and creaked, making him think of his grandfather. His grandfather was such a vibrant, fun-loving man. Tim pictured him sitting in a chair on the back patio, Bloody Mary in hand, smiling and joking. He missed his grandfather. Then he started reflecting on his situation. As far as he knew, Tim was alone. He had seen no one in over 2 months. Airplanes, helicopters, and the occasional boat sounded in the distance when it began. Tim yelled and jumped, flailing his arms to no effect. None of them ever stopped. Then, after 2 weeks, they ceased and stayed silent. The only sounds now filling his ears were the rustles of palm branches and the gentle waves. He tried to leave his island once, but when several alligators and a shark followed him, Tim considered it safer on his small plot of dry land, so he set up camp and claimed it for his own. He spent the days yelling out for help or taunting the swiftly moving gators. Not once did the thought of them climbing up out of the water ever occur to him. Tim watched the sun rise to its heights, the only show he had now, and sat still with his hands on his knees. The gnawing hunger in his stomach long ago turned to a constant feeling of emptiness. He learned to ignore mostly. Before long, Tim found he'd spent the entire day waiting, watching, and not moving. The sun set, and darkness followed. Black night covered the waters, and stars filled the sky. If there was ever one thing Tim could be thankful for since the asteroid strike, it was the unending attraction of the night sky. He laid back on the cooling sand, mesmerized by the twinkling stars above. He made out the constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, and many others he couldn't name. As he lay there, ready for another night of nocturnal beauty, something caught his eye. Red streaked the sky. One after another, bright red and orange streaks fell from above. Like a hailstorm of fire. Tim furrowed his brow, trying to understand. All around him, small red streaks smacked the water, huge cascading waves shooting up and out. "What the?" Tim said as a rock the size of a quarter slammed into the sand, just feet from him, forming a crater larger than twice the size of his head. Tim jumped and backed away from the crater, his arms shaking. He looked up again at the sky. For a moment, he thought he saw the familiar red of his grandfather's Bloody Mary. It made him smile. The rock slammed his head, killing him instantly. He died with a smile, thinking about his grandfather. Hello there! Welcome to No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction Podcast. My name is Chris Baker-Dersch. I'm your producer and editor. I wanted to put those 2 stories back to back today because they are all about a future time in which people have a choice as to whether or not they take the warnings. Saving Andy by Lars Hoffman is how we started, and he does with Saving Andy a thing that is really hard to do, which is do a lot of world building and create great futuristic science fiction in this flash fiction form. Saving Andy is less than 400 words, but it takes you to a time and a place. Very, very well done work. And I do wonder if those men have the ability to resist a damsel in distress. Then we took you to Sunshine and Asteroids. Sunshine and Asteroids is by Jason J. Nugent. It comes from his new flash fiction collection called Almost Average, which is available on Smashwords and everywhere else. So if you're looking for a flash fiction compilation, that one is your one. It brings up a lot of images in my head as I listen to that story, read that story. The first one is I live here in Seattle, and over the weekend we just had a whole spate of stories about how woefully we are unprepared for an earthquake. And I thought about what it must be like to be sitting in your house in Florida and then have a wave go entirely over the state of Florida and just wipe it into oblivion. How woefully unprepared you must be for a moment like that. And the other thing, this is it's strange what stories bring into your head when you think about the imagery. But I was thinking about, I was at a baseball game with my 2-year-old, and he was fast asleep on my lap during the 8th inning. And this foul ball comes up, high pop up, and comes down right at us and lands on the seat right in front of me. And I think about, in a world where I didn't have my sleeping toddler on my lap, I probably would have reached for the ball and tried to catch the ball. But in a world where my sleeping toddler is sitting on my lap, my entire life goal is to keep the baby from being hit by this ball. And I think if that's what a foul ball does to you, imagine what a rock falling out of the sky does. But yet I can remember being a kid, and we used to have these meteor showers in the late summer, and you'd lie in an open field and look up and see these shooting stars, and it would be flying rock, basically. It just doesn't come down far enough to hit you. So that fine line between what's beautiful and what's dangerous and what's fun and what can kill you is interesting. And knowing when the warning is to get out of the way and when it's not. We're going to close today with Anne Elizabeth Weisgerber's story Rewards, which is about what you really have to be afraid of in this life, even when things are a bit strange. So enjoy that. We will see you next week here on No Extra Words. Have a great week.
Rewards by Anne Elizabeth Weisgerber. It was 8 years until my mother figured every watch I'd ever owned, borrowed, received, or worn, wind-up, oscillating, or battery-powered, stopped working within a day of my threading its strap. In hindsight, it was not because I swam, went out in the rain, or bumped into sideboards that my watches keeled. It was me. When I was small, coins and bracelets, rings and musket shot would shake out of my beach towel and picnic blanket when we returned to the Chevrolet. At home, we once unpacked an ornate silver fork, not ours. For 7 years, Mother cursed Carl Harbinger, the jeweler who replaced my watch batteries, calling him shyster and crook. She returned one, a bulova, 3 times before Carl started calling her Dumpkopf and a con. Then, while standing in the family flower shop at a workbench, spinning a stephanotis bud on a wire, simultaneously stretching and pulling and feeding green floral tape to the spin, she thought of the handmade bride's bouquet she constructed. Absent-mindedly, she considered my future bridedom, and then considered my personal history. I could see that she was using the old bean. Stem by stem of delicate flowers, she retraced each wind of her memory back to my debut. She bade 8-year-old me stand at the bench where customers could see and model the bouquet. Her combing of memories seemed to catch a knot, however, and she stood squared off with me, a hand on each shoulder, and positioned me directly below the shop's old wall clock. Instead of the usual cooing, was all she managed. As I stood below the clock, it quivered and quaked. The minute hand shimmered and wavered. Coins dropped on the concrete work floor. Mother watched me pick them up, and then drove me directly home to bed. Mother gave me a cuckoo clock after that, no more watches. Harbinger called it their buku clock. It was fully mechanical and required only the force of gravity. Every time the cuckoo shouldered out of his roost, my ears swallowed a fallen Krugerrand. My eyes remembered the sun, black like sackcloth made of goat hair. Ever since I was 8, I've been terrified of time and money and Mother.
Thanks for listening to the No Extra Words podcast. For more information on today's stories and contributors, or to learn how to submit your own work, please visit us at noextrawords.wordpress.com. The best support you can give the show is to recommend us to your family and friends. See you next time.